Have you ever wished that you could go back and change something that happened in your life almost instantaneously? There's this show called The Office, and it's one of my favorites. And in The Office, there's this episode, this season, where Michael Scott, the main character, just did something boneheaded again, and he's digesting what just happened with somebody else, and he's like, shouldn't have done that. And the other person goes, hindsight. And Michael says, should have had hindsight. Now, us as a viewer, we know that that's impossible to have hindsight before it happens, because hindsight's literally looking back on things you've done. Otherwise, it'd be called foresight. But I know that feeling of wishing that I had the ability to go back and change something almost instantaneously. It's the feeling I had when I was on my honeymoon and I bit into that onion ring only to discover it was actually calamari. It's when I look back at my 7th grade haircut and thought, ooh, the surfer look was not for you, man. It's every Sunday during the fall when I'm sitting there rooting for my favorite team, the Chicago Bears, and I'm like, why couldn't a 5 or 6-year-old me have chosen a team that would actually win, that actually knew how to have a quarterback? And I'm sure you have those moments of, I wish I could have, should have, would have, and a lot of times it's almost instant regret, instant wish for the hindsight. And so you can pause right now and write that and share that with us in the comments. But I'm going to share with you one of my biggest times I wish I would have had hindsight. And it's not as funny as my other ones. See, I had this feeling from God that I should call my great-grandma. My great-grandma was this little woman who was fierce and was able to be independent and drive herself, but she was super kind and the most faithful person I've ever known. After she died, you could literally feel the world having less prayers. I could feel less prayers for me personally. But before she died, I had this call on my heart from God to give her a phone call. And I thought, you know what, I'll call her tomorrow or next week or next month. And I just kept pushing it off. And I kept feeling this call and I kept pushing it off. Well, next week became next month. And soon I hadn't given her a call and I had ignored that feeling that I should. It's then that I found out that one day she was walking through her house and she fell. And she broke her hip. When she went to the doctor, they told her that it would be a 1-year recovery. And I felt God saying, call her now. And I was like, later. Maybe I thought that she'd be okay if I just ignored it. But then came the cancer diagnosis that same week. When they were looking at her hip, they discovered that she had cancer. And she would have to be undergoing chemo while doing a year of recovery from a broken hip. But still I didn't call. And chance after chance came and I didn't call that week. And in that same week, while she's still in the hospital, she had heart attack number 1, and her not-so-great-grandson didn't give her a call. And then came heart attack number 2. And my first, second, and 1 millionth chances ended as she passed away. And I instantly had this feeling, this gut reaction of, I wish I would have done something different. I wish I would have just talked to her one more time. I wish I would have listened to God. We've been going through the book of Daniel, and we're up against a story now where a person in this story of this historical event feels like they should have had hindsight, has that emotion of wishing they could change something that they couldn't. And this person's name is Belshazzar. He's the new king after Nebuchadnezzar has died, and it's been 40 more years, and so now Daniel's becoming an older man. The former exile from Jerusalem and advisor to kings is getting older, and this new king, maybe he was young or he just acted very young and immature, but this new king's on the throne, and so the king throws a party. And at this party, he is doing a lot of dumb things. That's what a lot of alcohol and bravado can do, right? It gives you lots of chances to wish you had hindsight. Sometimes humorous, in this case, not so much. You see, while he was drinking in front of 1,000 noble people, he called for the relics of Jerusalem, the conquered land, to be brought in, the ones that used to be in Jerusalem's temple, to Jerusalem's God, to the God we believe is the one true God. And he had them brought in, and he had them passed out and filled with alcohol and drank out of them and treated this sacred relics as if they were red Solo cups, disposable. What a slap in the face to a whole people and a whole religion and a whole belief system, right? But he was the king. People are supposed to fear the king. They're supposed to listen to the king. But it's in this moment that something supernatural happens, that God shows up in a mighty way, in a crazy way, and this is what happens. Daniel chapter 5, verse 5, and the NLT says, "Suddenly they saw fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. The king himself saw the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale with fright. His knees knocked together, and his legs gave way beneath him. He collapsed in fear." And so what does this king do? Well, he does something actually rather smart, rather kingly. He calls together all the advisors and the wisest people he could find. And he says, "Tell me what this is writing on the wall says. Tell me what it means." And they looked at the writing on the wall, and they had no idea. And so that made Belshazzar even more afraid, and he had offered everything, but these people couldn't tell him anything. But then the queen mother came in and said, "Hey, why don't you call Daniel?" That's what Nebuchadnezzar used to do. So he calls in a guy who was from the very land that was being insulted earlier. And he says, "I will give you all this stuff if you do it." And Daniel says, No, I don't need any of that. I'm pretty good right now. But here's what this has to say, and I need to tell you something before we get to that. You see, Nebuchadnezzar, like we talked about last week in chapter 4, he was like a great tree. And then the Lord cut him down, but Nebuchadnezzar looked back to God, and God restored him. God restored him. God made him back and gave him back his sanity and his heart and helped him repent and turn from his ways. And then Daniel, who ironically enough name means God is my judge, shared with Belshazzar the judgment for what situation he is in. And this is what it says, verse 22 of chapter 5. "You are his successor, O Belshazzar, and you knew all of this, yet you've not humbled yourself before the Lord." In other words, you should have had hindsight, you fool. "For you have proudly defiled the Lord of heaven and have these cups from his temple brought before you. You will, and your nobles and your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them, while praising gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that neither can see nor hear nor know anything at all. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. So God has sent this hand to write this message." And Daniel explains what the message on the wall was. It was 3 words, and the first word was repeated twice. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsons. Mene, numbered. Your days are numbered, and they're coming to an end. Tekel, measured. You've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. You're not good enough. Parsons, divided. Your kingdom is about to be divided and handed over to the Medes and the Persians. In other words, like everyone else, your days will come to an end. Like everyone else, you are not good enough. And like everyone else who builds in this world things that can rust and moths can steal away, your kingdom isn't going to last. You can't take it with you. And this judgment that was handed over to Belshazzar, I don't believe was just for Belshazzar. I don't think it's just for kings of old. I think it's actually for us today. So the first one, Mene, numbered. Our days are numbered on this earth. The oldest person alive right now is 117. Many of us will actually make it close to that and break triple digits. Some of us will be 90 or 60 or 30 when our days come to end. Some never make it out of their teenage years or their childhood. But either way, our days are numbered and they're coming to an end, and things are happening, and we who have a God of multiple chances are running out of time to use those chances. We're running out of time every day, every moment. One more second is ticking off the clock to make things right. And for Belshazzar, that time was running short, and the time is running short for you and me as well. We only have so much time to make things right with the people that we have made wrong with. We only have so much time to love our kids before they're grown and gone. We only have so much time to love a spouse well. We only have so much time to learn who God is and who we are. We only have so much time. And when we don't use that time wisely, when we think we have more time than we actually have, we are left feeling like we wish we would have had hindsight. We wish we could have done something different, and we just can't. Because sometimes it's our clock that runs out, and sometimes it's other clocks that run out. And when their time runs out, our time runs out with them. And so I want you to do this. I want you to find a sticky note or something to write on, and write the word mene, M-E-N-E. And I want you to write down something that if you did not have time to do, that if your time ran out on this earth and you didn't do it, I want you to write down something that you would regret not doing that you could do today. Go ahead, take a second and write that down. Feel free to pause the video and do that. The next word, tekel, measured. He said, you've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. That means on a set of scales, if you measured everything that you've done, the bad will outweigh the good. It means that you're going to find at the end of your time, you just weren't good enough. Romans 3:23 tells us all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that word sin is an archery term. It doesn't mean bad. It means anything outside the bullseye. So you could be off by an inch or a mile, but that's still sin. If you're not perfect, you have missed the glory of God, missed perfection. And in every major religion in this world, it says that we will be measured for our lives here on earth. And in Buddhism, and the beliefs of Buddhism, when it comes to the gods of Hinduism, when it comes to the God of Islam, there is almost a karma-like justice that you have to pay for the things you've done on this earth. You have to give an accounting for all you've done. And in those belief systems, it's up to you to make everything right and everything okay. Here's the deal. We know we can't, and that we never will measure up, because not only do we not measure up to God's standard, we don't measure up to our own standard. Think about that for a second. If you just held you to your standards, you would be found wanting. You'd be found imperfect. Are you as kind as you demand others to be to you? Are you as generous as you want the 1%ers of this world to be with you? Are you as loving? Are you as good? I know I'm not. I don't even hit my own standards, let alone God's. And in all these other religions, it says there's a karma-like thing that will happen to us, that we will get what we deserve for all the things that we've done. But in Christianity, we believe in the true God, the one true God, the God that Daniel believed in, that wrote on that wall. And what that God did is he came down and he paid that debt and made the scales balance, made the scales in our favor with his own blood and his own death, his own sacrifice. No other religion says that. They say it's up to you, and we know we're not good enough. We need God. And that's what Christianity says we have, is we have a God that comes in and steps in and pays our price. He is able to make things right between us and God. He's able to make things right between us and others. So on this second note, I want you to write down the word tekel. And this one you can write in code if you feel like it, but write down something that you need to be made right in your life. Maybe it was a poor choice of how you spent your time, or a bad decision. Maybe it's that you hurt somebody deeply. Maybe it's something you hurt yourself deeply. Maybe it's just something between you and God. But write down a way, a thing that you need to account for, that you need God to pay that way for you. And now the third one, Parsons. Everything you've built will be divided. And everything we build on this world, whether it's our success, it'll be gone when we die. If it's our money, it's going to be divided up and be less when we die. If it's our physiques, we can't take that with us. If it's our popularity, we can't take that with us. But God says everything will be divided that He hasn't commanded us to build. And here's the things He commanded us to build, the two biggest things. He told us to love others and love Him. Love Him and love others. And see, love is the only thing that multiplies when it's divided, because that will be divided out when we're gone too. And how you loved other people is going to be divided out. How you love God is going to be divided out and multiplied. So right now, I want you to write down a way that you feel like you would love to show God your love and your appreciation, that you wish would be the standard of love between you and God in a way that's different than it currently is. And I also want you to write others, and write down a way that you can love others better. Because love, again, is the only thing that will multiply when divided. Now, the ending of stories matter. And Belshazzar's ending is very tragic. You see that judgment that came? It came to fruition that very evening. It says in verse 30, that very night, Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed. And Darius the Mede took over his kingdom at the age of 62. He was killed that very evening. He didn't make it another day. Are you going to be like Belshazzar and run out of time to make the things right that you need to make right between you and God and you and others? Are you going to end your life with the scales unevenly yoked, not in your favor? Are you going to be like Belshazzar and have everything you've built divided and gone? Or are you going to do something different? Are you going to have hindsight in this moment before you actually need it? I want you, if you want to do this with me, I'm going to do this week, so I really invite you to take those three and hang them on a wall. Let it be the writing on your wall from now till Easter. We call that season Lent. And go ahead and put it up there and remind yourself that your days are numbered. Your scale is uneven. And everything you have built will be divided. So where are you going to spend your time? How are you going to make things right? Hint, by trusting God. And how are you going to do something that actually is going to matter when you're gone? How are you going to love God better? How are you going to love others better? And like I said, endings of stories matter. So I'm going to tell you one more ending of a story in my life. While I was living in China last year, I felt a call in my heart to call my dad's mom, my grandma. And my dad's mom was very different than my great-grandma. They were the same, my great-grandma on my mom's side. My dad's grandma was fiercely independent as well, but she had this nothing can penetrate her kind of persona about her, that she could stand up and do anything. And this woman was powerful and independent as well, and always commanded the attention of the room with the force of her amazing personality. And I felt that I should call her, and I didn't at first. And I saw her health going up and down and left and right. And so I wanted to wait till I got back to the U.S. so I could hug her one more time and hold her and tell her there. But I felt God was calling me to call her. And so even though I was returning to the U.S. in a matter of weeks, I called her. I called her on FaceTime. And when I called her, she didn't look as powerful. She still had that twinkle in her eye, you know? She still had her humor, and that she was able to hit me with that every once in a while. But she told me she was tired. She told me she was ready to be done. And this woman who had never talked faith with me, even though I'm a pastor, had never talked faith with me, at the end of our conversation, She said, "Will you pray for me?" And the last thing I ever did with my grandma was pray with her. Pray for her. That's the very last thing I got to do. And when I hung up the phone, her days came to an end just a few short days later. The difference this time was that I listened to God. And instead of needing hindsight, I received a blessing. Whenever we listen to God, we are instantly blessed. But we're also given some great moments of blessings that are just tangible and real that we get to see. So are you going to be somebody at the end of your days who wishes they had hindsight? Or are you going to listen to God and be blessed and live a life that is a blessing to others? It's up to you to choose. Hindsight or blessing. The difference is choosing to listen to God. Will you do that today? I hope so. If today's message spoke to you or could speak to someone you know, feel free to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. We really want to hear what's going on in your life, and if you need some extra prayer, please send us a message. We'd love to pray for you as well. If you never met this Jesus, this God who can make things right, I would love to have that conversation with you personally. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.